What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Grim Dredley. Recently, I'm just going to cut right to the chase with this one because this is an issue that really gets me worked up and going. Recently, I was talking to a friend about the job search and everything else, and as far as being in America, especially in the American South. I think I was talking to them about getting hassled by the cops as well, and they basically likened the reason that I had a hard time to minorities being so violent. Well, one, this friend of mine, she isn't from the United States at all. She is European, let's just put it that way. And I wanted to type this in. This was a conversation via social media, but sometimes I do have problems with the words forming in my brain, but not being able to get to my fingers and get to my pen for me to say things. I wanted to say was, firstly, it's not just minorities in this country that are violent. Color does not make violence at all. Poverty makes violence. Poverty is a major defining factor in whether somebody's going to go and sell drugs, whether somebody is going to go and rob somebody. Poverty and drug use, which normally follows very closely with poverty, even though drugs knows no demographic. Drugs are done in every social class. What is to tell of that? Makes it harder to find work and stuff when you're black, because due to certain laws in this country that were passed long ago and certain rights we had to fight for as a people in this country, it's still tough because even though we won civil rights in the 60s, which was only close to 50 years ago, it's not that long ago in the history of a country, even though we won those civil rights, the attitudes that passed those laws still exist. When a person of my color goes to a business to find work, that person tends to get judged, especially if the people running the business are Caucasian or are foreign in any way, because of things they've heard in the media about blacks and Hispanics. So when a person like me, black man, goes for an interview off the bat, before anything, when I walk in, no matter how I'm dressed, the first thing that person given the interview is going to think is, uh-oh, can he speak right? How does he carry himself? Things they're not necessarily thinking first up when a Caucasian person walks into said interview. I mean, I walk into an interview, I sit down, and normally within the first 3 minutes, I get remarks such as, "You're very well spoken for a black man." I'm very well spoken. Well, my mother didn't allow me to speak Ebonics or slang growing up. So yes, I know how to make correct, proper sentences. I speak well. I read. I am educated, by the way, as well, and choose to carry myself as such. However, because of certain already preconceived biases, rarely gets that far. That happens to a lot of black and Hispanic males in this country. Again, poverty plays more of a part too, because when you think about it, in this country, school funding is normally given to the schools that perform better. Well, since early on in the 1900s, schools in predominantly white neighborhoods were getting more funding. The whole separate but equal thing was bullshit. Just gonna say that now, was bullshit. So, when those schools got more funding, it allowed things such as new textbooks, better, more state-of-the-art equipment, better teachers. So those students performed better. Those students performed better, again, the next year when the budget's allocated, that school gets more funding, and so on and so forth. So, when I was going to elementary school in the late 80s, early 90s, I had textbooks that ended with Ronald Reagan. I had textbooks, even worse, that said we would never put a man on the moon. There were textbooks that ended in the 1950s that I had to use to study for standardized tests, which had information about current events and current innovations. That happens a lot, meaning poor education standards in minority neighborhoods. Poor education leads to a lot of minorities not going to college. This changed in 7th grade for me, as I was accelerated anyway. I got sent to better and better schools, magnet schools, stuff like that. But it's hard to get that for everybody. A lot of kids in school may not be accelerated, and learning in schools that are stuck to their neighborhoods pretty much kept them unaccelerated, unable to compete with kids from more affluent neighborhoods. When you get that, poor education, combined with the fact that their family before them, the generation before them, also were coming up in poverty because the law made it so blacks and Hispanics in this country couldn't hold certain jobs. That, compound year after year, generation after generation, leads to poverty. It leads to a different attitude. That's how you have kids who would be more interested in selling drugs or stealing from people, no matter what the race, because there are white families living in poverty as well in this country. You've got kids that would be more interested in dirty dealings because they've gotten it ingrained in them that they'll never be more than they are. My mother worked 2 jobs at times. She taught me work ethic. A lot of parents in poor neighborhoods work multiple jobs. A lot of parents taught their children work ethic. But let's face it, when mom is a washerwoman, not my mother, but just in general, is a washerwoman, and your father is a janitor, they're not going to make much money to put you through college. You know, that's why kids from more impoverished neighborhoods tend to focus more on sports, music, other ways to try and get ahead, and we know that those are sincerely up to chance too, creating more poverty, and poverty creating violence. It's not that minorities are violent, just more minorities in this country tend to live in poverty. There are neighborhoods around cities such as Atlanta, New York, Chicago, which are mostly black suburbs with low crime rates because
That was blacks who managed to get out, managed to get to college, became members of professional trades, professional fields, and were able to get away from the bad neighborhoods. But again, left up to chance, it takes a lot, you know. So it's really not easy for blacks in this country in this day and age. I go places nowadays and you would think, you know, this is almost 50 years, could be 50 years, I have to do the math because this just came to me, that Dr. King and Malcolm X and others marched for civil rights. But again, attitudes are still the same. There are times, and this happens frequently, that I'll walk past somebody in a store and I'll hear somebody say, "Oh, that nigger," or "that wetback," if a Latino walks past them, you know, and you can see, especially where I am, because I'm in the Deep South, and the Deep South is really bad for it. The racism is still there, you know. There are neighborhoods in this country where a black man can't walk without getting hassled or violence happening because he's in the wrong neighborhood. You know, he's in a neighborhood that's not known for its affluence. Me being a welder by trade and mechanic also by trade, I was able to, you know, make a fairly decent amount of money, and I'm college educated. So at this point in time, I lived in a nicer neighborhood. I used to get hassled a lot because I was a black man and I'd be coming home from work and dirty trades, so my uniform would be dirty, and carrying my hard hat, you know, and my ride would drop me off and I'd be walking into my neighborhood, and people would ask me what I was doing there, or as I'm walking through, call the cops because, well, there's a black man walking and he seems suspicious. And I'd show the cops my ID after being hassled, and it was, "Oh, sorry, sir," you know. But it's because of those attitudes. It's because there are people, unfortunately, in the year 2012 that only see race, you know. And then there are people who have become so downtrodden with their lot in life and have fed into the stereotype so much that they push the stereotype forward and they help keep those ideals alive. I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend in Walmart, and he's another black male, also highly educated, and of course we speak proper English. We were speaking on something, and a girl came up to us and asked, and I quote, "Why is you acting so white?" This is horrible. You'll even see it online too, where people will type and their status reflects an attitude that should not be presented. I mean, you can see the messages written out phonetically. "What's up with that?" And "how some nigga gon' try me like a bitch." And these people speak like this as well, which brings down a whole group of people. Just saying, what are your opinions on this? Is it race that creates violence, or is it poverty? It's your boy, Grim to the Dread. I'm going to cut this one a little short. Remember, kill your local drug dealer. Deuces.